I'm a veteran, and I came over from Northern Ireland for the weekend. And one of the things I came over for was to go to the cenotaph yesterday to observe the 2-minute silence. And there's a lot of other people going as well, patriots and football fans and so on and so forth. And I was with a crowd of football fans. We came into Whitehall, as we were coming up the road into Whitehall, everyone was very good natured, there was a bit of singing, but everyone was in really good form. We got to Whitehall, and the police had sort of barricaded the thing off. We'd been told that we'd be able to get to the cenotaph. We got there were barricades there. So I spoke to the police. I said, look, I'm a veteran. I said, we want to get to the cenotaph. How do we get there? They said, well, you can't come straight up the road. You've got to go onto embankments and then turn right. I think it was right, and go up past Scotland Yard. So we did that. We went up embankment, turned right. When we got to where Scotland Yard was, where there's a little choke point, there was about 20 police officers, batons out, very, very aggressive. I mean, there was one guy, his eyes were literally bulging out of his head, and I said, mate, you need to calm down. There's actually footage. I think you guys put the footage out yesterday. So we tried to calm the whole thing down, and the police were kind of so antagonistic, and they wouldn't listen to what we were saying, because what I was saying was, there's a lot of people coming through here, maybe 500, 200, whatever it was, I couldn't really tell, but a big body of men coming through there. And the reality was, them being there was actually causing a bigger problem, just stepping out of the way, stepping to the side, and letting us all through. And then what happened, the police were getting so aggressive, the guys behind just pushed me. When I'm an 18-stone guy, they pushed me into the police line, and the police line broke, and we all got through, and that actually solved the problem, thankfully, because otherwise I think it could have got really, really ugly. And it was just so provocative, Peter. The whole time that we were there, the police had batons out, we were being aggressive. And I was thinking, when I was in the army, I served in Northern Ireland supporting the RUC. We used to protect police officers, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was in this situation where I've got these police officers waving batons at me. I got my medal on, so it's obviously I'm not there for violence.
Yeah, of course.
I'm not poppy on. And obviously, yes, whenever you get those sort of crowds, there can be boisterousness. But the police, it just seemed like they wanted to provoke a fight. That's the vibe.
But there are so many criticisms, aren't there, of political policing, and I'm sure that there was no one you knew and nobody anywhere near you, Richard, but there were people who didn't obey the law yesterday. The police say certainly there have been numerous arrests. I'm sure you would never defend anybody who's broken the law, but there were just a lot of people who just wanted to go to the cenotaph and support it and help in a way to people were talking about protecting the cenotaph.
That was the idea.
Yeah.
That was the idea.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole point of us going there was to put a buffer around the cenotaph, which we did. I mean, there must have been, in our crowd, there must have been, I think, about 2,000 or 3,000 near the cenotaph. There were other people at Parliament Square. A lot of them were veterans. This is the thing that people aren't, picking up on. It wasn't, and the other thing is, there's a real slur here that all the people that went there were far-right thugs. That's just not the case.
It's interesting you mention that, Richard. I have not, over the past, I was quoting Jess Phillips, a politician, who called them far-right thugs. The Prime Minister's called them far-right thugs. But, I mean, you don't know what their politics are, actually. And in terms of the people who've broken the law, we're not defending them. And it must actually, Richard, let me ask you this. It must be very frustrating for you when you go and there are people there who perhaps aren't veterans, doesn't matter, people coming to the cenotaph who want to support what's going on, who have reacted perhaps, maybe you haven't got a cenotaph in previous years, reacting perhaps to what's going on in the wider context in London, the pro-Palestinian march and so on, who obey the law, who do, they're there, they're freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, that's what this country's about. But then there are just some who break the law. There are some who go over the top, who we've had 126 arrests. That must be really frustrating for you, Richard.
It is frustrating, but and again, I think we've got to look at it in the context. I don't know how many football fans and veterans and patriotic people were there yesterday, but I think it was a very, very small percentage of people actually broke the law. And some of the people that were arrested, as far as I can tell from what I've looked at, they weren't arrested for committing an offence. They were arrested because they might breach the peace. So I think there was 80 people that were arrested for potentially breaching the peace.
That's interesting. Yeah, I was actually talking.
Released with that charge.
Sorry to interrupt you, Richard, but yes, I was talking to a senior police officer yesterday on my show, and he said that's a tactic the police often use, where they say, we think you might potentially do something, so we're going to arrest you, we'll bring you down the station, process you, and then basically they're basically de-arrested at the end of that. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what happens and how these things are actually playing out as things go. Richard, thanks so much for your. Sorry, go ahead.
Just say one more thing. On that point of the arrest, that also spins into the narrative of there being mass arrests on the supposed right-wing extremists as we've been painted, which of course we're not. So it reinforces narrative, because those 80 people arrested, people aren't going to realise that they've been released without charge and that they're never going to be rearrested on that.
Yeah.
All the headline is that from our side, if you like, from the patriots that wanted to protect the cenotaph, our side, over 120 people have been arrested. But we know that 80 of them have been released without charge, and the rest of them haven't been found guilty either.
I just want to ask you one more question, Richard, and it comes from a texter, Mary in Northern Ireland. He says, why was a genuine veteran in the company of football thugs allowing himself to be caught up in violence and confrontation with police? How does that honour the war dead? The police had an exclusion zone around the cenotaph. It didn't need Richard and his friends to protect it. Why did you travel from Northern Ireland, especially for this?
Yeah, well, I was coming over anyway, but the reality of the situation is that, again, she's tarring everyone's football thugs. The reality of the situation is the people I was with, none of them got engaged in any violence whatsoever. So if you're not engaging in violence and you go into the cenotaph to patriotically stand and observe the 2-minute silence, you can't be tarred as a football thug. So again, I think what Mary's got to do is look at the overall picture and realise that a lot of people in the media do not want.
But there were people, Richard. There were. I mean, you weren't, but there were definitely people who broke the law, and there were people who took things far too far, and I'm sure you would condemn them.
Absolutely, and if you look at the statement that was put out by the organisers of the event, the statement said that they go to the cenotaph, protect the cenotaph, and then disperse. That's what the statement said. So anything that happened.
So you didn't have. I mean, the police say they have that exclusion zone. They called it the remembrance footprint.
Yeah.
Presumably, you just didn't trust them to do their job, which, in fairness, they seem to have done yesterday.
Yes, they didn't, because obviously they had a confrontation with us, which was completely unnecessary. From the point of view of what's been happening, if you look, actually in a way, we kind of achieved what we wanted to achieve in going there, which was basically putting a buffer around the cenotaph, making sure no veterans were harassed in the area, and also making sure that the 2-minute silence wasn't interrupted by anyone. It was an amazing, place to be, because the 2-minute silence was absolutely fantastically observed. There wasn't a peep. And I've never seen so many people there on Armistice Day, because obviously Armistice Day is a lot smaller crowd, but there was literally thousands of people there, absolutely silent. When the veterans walked past and when the military walked past, they got rounds of applause. So what I'm trying to do is put the truth about what happened, as opposed to the hyperbole that you're hearing about all these right-wing thugs running rampage in London. There were some very unfortunate things that happened that shouldn't have happened. Nobody should break the law.
But surely,
we shouldn't do that.
Just as a final point, Richard, surely if there are people who are breaking the law, if there are people who are doing things that they shouldn't be doing, as is the case with the pro-Palestinian march, and I don't really understand why people go on that, because they know there are people who are going to break the law. I mean, maybe you didn't think it was going to happen, but clearly there were people who broke the law yesterday, and there are people who will associate you, rightly or wrongly, with those people because you had gone with the group that you went to the cenotaph. What would you say to that criticism?
Well, very simply, I've got friends from lots of different backgrounds, and I've got a lot of friends that are involved that are football fans. I've got a lot of friends that are veterans. I've got a lot of friends that are patriots, and I'm never going to condemn the people in those groups that are peaceful, that are patriotic, love the country, and are standing for the right reasons at the cenotaph. If people want to go and create mayhem and disorder, that I absolutely condemn that all day long. That's not what we're about. We're about basically being patriotic, loving our country, and taking a stand for what's right. And that's why I was there yesterday. That's why the vast majority of the people were there with me. It wasn't to cause any disturbance or break the law. It was to basically have a peaceful observance of the 2-minute silence, but also make sure that anybody that shouldn't be there didn't get anywhere near the place, if that makes any sense.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Richard, for that. And I mean, there are certainly many people, certainly the Prime Minister has talked about, as he puts it, right-wing thugs who were there yesterday. There were, of course, many arrests as well. We had 126 people arrested throughout the day. Police say 300,000 demonstrators joined the march on Saturday, the pro-Palestinian march, which fell on the same day, of course, as Armistice Day, marking the end of World War I as well. And we have certainly some reaction to what Richard is saying there. One texter saying the police resources were diverted to deal with the right-wing thugs and so-called patriots, says one texter as well. Someone asking where Hamza Youssef was as well. Where was the Scottish First Minister? Was he at the cenotaph today? I presume